Richard Cohen wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post that actually caused a major, major backlash. Now, the article was actually titled Chris Christie's Tea Party Problem. And the article was mainly focused on talking about why Chris Christie wouldn't make it through a Republican primary. Now, that's pretty true. I don't think he could make it through a Republican primary either. But the main focus on this article, or at least on the backlash, was where he had wrote this. Quote, "Today's GOP is not racist, as Harry Belafonte alleged about the Tea Party, but it is deeply troubled about the expansion of government, about immigration, about secularism, about the mainstreaming of what used to be the avant-garde. People with," and get this will blow your mind. "People with conventional views must repress a gag reflex when considering the mayor-elect of New York, a white man married to a black woman and with 2 biracial children." Oh, and he also goes to mention, should I mention that Bill de Blasio's wife, Shirley MacRae, used to be a lesbian? He continues, "This family represents the cultural changes that have enveloped parts, but not all, of America. To cultural conservatives, this doesn't look like their country at all." Now, in the words of Ron Burgundy, that escalated quickly. Now, right there, the word conventional, when it comes to conventional people must repress a gag reflex, right there, that's the big, big problem right there. I have an issue with that. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on this.
Hard to. It's a strange statement, and it's hard to know exactly where he's coming from. And maybe he used the word conventional. You know, it seems as if he's trying to explain the worldview of the Tea Party and conservatives, because a lot of their positions do, you know, they come off very racist.
Right.
So, excuse me. I don't really know much about Cohen. I don't know much about his history to say, you know, this is one thing, and I don't know if I can call him racist for this one thing or not. On its face, it's just maybe he just picked some unfortunate words. It's hard to know exactly what he's trying to say there. I mean,
to me, it almost seems like more of an issue of an editor who should have said, "Hey, Richard, I think we need to kind of reword this a little less awkwardly, because some people could perceive it." It just seems like he was more out of touch than trying to be like this, any kind of, like, you know, fever-pitched racist.
Well,
Yeah.
he actually came out later, and after he got into some heat for this, and he had said, well, no, I was just expressing the views of some of the people within the Tea Party. Those aren't my views. He said, quote, I didn't write one line, I wrote a column. The column was about Tea Party extremism, and I was not expressing my views. I was expressing the views of what I think some in the Tea Party held. I don't think everybody in the Tea Party is like that, because I know there are blacks in the Tea Party. So they're not all racist, unless I'm going to start doing mind reading about why those black people are there. Now, so he comes back, and he's like, backpedal.
I think this guy shouldn't be talking. I think there's a lot of people who shouldn't be talking.
That's unfortunate because he writes for a living.
There's so many, like, there's so many examples of just really blatant racism. I think, you know, if like I said, to me, like, from a news business perspective, having worked in newspapers, that's like an editorial. Someone's reading his copy and approving it, unless he, you know, just has carte blanche, no editorial review, which I don't know of anybody at a major newspaper.
No, I don't think he has carte blanche review at all.
No.
He's got editors, and for some reason the editors were like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's really
fine with me.
It's an out of touch kind of bubble.
Well, you know, Cohen he's actually in his 70s now, so he's an older gentleman. And so maybe, because remember back in the 60s, interracial marriage was not very popular in some places. It was even outlawed in certain southern states at that point. So maybe he's looking at it through that old lens, I should say.
Yeah.
That sort of bubble that he lived in at that time.
A lot of the people in the Tea Party are older, and they see the nation changing in a way that
makes them uncomfortable.
They don't understand. You know, they do. They come from a different time. They do have a different worldview, even though, you know, so many things have happened within that time. But it's unfortunate. But, you know, there are the segment of the older white Christian, somewhat wealthy population, not always wealthy, who want it to be like the good old days, you know, and what does that mean when people say that, you know, all of these other things.
I know for some of them, I think that they would love to say the N-word again.
Well, exactly, right. And so, you know, that's a view, and young people these days don't have that, and it really is, I think it's really in a particular segment of the population that does hold that view, that, you know, it does make them gag to see an interracial couple. David and I have experienced that here where we live, and it's always from the older people who live in the past and still wish it was.
Except for the Africans.
Well, that's a different story.
Yeah. Kicked out of the restaurant.
So but, yeah, I think it's an old-fashioned, out-of-touch worldview, and some of it comes from fear of change and seeing the country changing in a way that they just aren't ready for.
So would it be fair to say that Cohen maybe still subscribes to that point of view back then?
He could. Like I said before, I don't really know much about him. I haven't, I can't say from this one thing and call him a racist. I'm not
but I actually have some, see, this isn't the only time he's gotten in trouble for stuff like this. Okay. I've got actually a couple examples lined up for you that I'd like to say.
Lay it on us. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So one time that he had wrote about the Trayvon Martin case, he said, I don't like what George Zimmerman did, and I hate that Trayvon Martin is dead. But also I can understand why Zimmerman was suspicious and why he thought Martin was wearing a uniform we all recognize.
Oh. Well, that's pretty clear.
That sounds a little racist, I think.
Yeah, that sounds very
Yeah, that's
racist.
like Price is Right horn. Wah, wah, wah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. You know, and again, it's just an old, out-of-date point of view that lots of people in his generation still hold. I don't know if it doesn't make it right, obviously, but I think that you know, it's hard for people to change. It's hard for anybody to change in a really big way. When you've grown up for years in a society that says these people are different, they're dangerous, you should be afraid of them, you need to stay away from them. That's hard to change out of, you know, once the greater society starts to change. Like, I mean, I can understand that. I'm not saying, you know, that these people are in the right or anything, but it's just hard for people to change deeply held beliefs and values.
So do you think that because of that do you think that he should still get in trouble for that and be held accountable for what he said and the worldview that he may still hold?
Well, yeah, I mean, we live in 2013, and he shouldn't go around. I mean, obviously, everyone can say whatever they want. He works for a large paper.
Well, you know, I would say most of his readers are probably kind of like, when you look at the demographics of newspapers,
they're
he's
older,
kind of preaching
white.
to that older,
Exactly.
white. I mean, I don't know anybody. If I went out on the street today, I couldn't find anyone. I'm like, hey, what do you think about Richard Cohen? Wrote in the Washington Post. You can find anybody, like maybe outside of media circles in Washington, anywhere who knows anything about Richard Cohen.
I think it's good that we have these conversations when people who are in a position where their words are heard by a large number of people, or they have some kind of position of power, they need to be confronted, and, you know, people need to say, what you said is wrong. It's not appropriate.
He really doesn't need to have.
You know,
I don't understand how he has such a big like, how does he have this audience to begin with?
Well, who knows what their numbers are, their
Right.
and what, you know, I mean, you look at Fox, you know, O'Reilly has great numbers, but it's like 2 million, like, 75-year-olds. No offense to 75-year-olds, but, you know, he can say that,
Yeah.
that old-fashioned shit to them because they live in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's kind of funny is I actually wanted to show a way that he was defending himself, what he had said. He said, every once in a while, I take an unconventional stance as a liberal.
Yeah, he says he's
As someone
liberal.
who has always been called a liberal. If someone on the right wrote this, no one would care. No one would make a big deal about it because I veer once in a while. But because I veer every once in a while from orthodoxy, or maybe more than once in a while, I get plastered this way.
Well, that's totally wrong, first of all, that if a conservative said it, they'd still get blasted just as much.
Well, they get blasted by the liberal media, but when it comes to the liberal media,
Right.
Sorry, I had to do the air quotes.
Yeah.
I'll edit that out later. Conservative media, you see, things that are basically like Geraldo Rivera, I believe, right, going on about the hoodies,
Right.
and how that's thugwear and all that sorts of stuff.
Right.
The right wing doesn't care. They eat that stuff up. They love it.
Yeah.
So when somebody on the right side of the aisle says stuff like that,
Is this guy on the right side?
mostly right.
He calls himself a liberal, but Washington Post is they're a pretty conservative paper.
Yeah.
They're very establishment, I
You know,
think.
maybe he's
They're
like
very establishment.
Who's that liberal token on?
Well, he still believes.
Bob Beckel?
Yeah.
He still believes in the idea of a conventional person.
And conventional
that's-
America and the American dream and what America looks like is totally different than what it looked like in 1950.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And remember, back in 1950,
Years
we
ago,
had the
from now, it'll
Dixiecrats.
look totally different too.
Sorry.
Remember, back in the 1950s and 60s, we had the Dixiecrats. We had the Southern Strategy. They were Democrats back then.
Right.
There was this racist wing of the Democratic Party in the South, and that's what now forms the core of the Tea Party.
Right.
So a lot of people forget about that party switch.
Yeah.
And especially some conservatives will come back and say, yeah, but Democrats were racist. Republicans were the party of Lincoln.
Right. Well, yeah, and a lot of
You
people.
finish reading your history book, dude.
Well, that's what people don't do, but that's a whole other conversation.
I do have one more example, actually, for you to make your decision on.
Okay. I'm swayed. He's guilty. The second example, but lay it on us. Give it to
Yeah.
All
I say,
right. So what he said,
Slowly.
and he had watched the movie 12 Days a Slave, right?
Okay.
And so he said after watching that, quote, I sometimes think I have spent my years unlearning what I learned earlier in my life. Slavery was not a benign institution in which mostly benevolent whites owned innocent and grateful blacks. Slavery was a lifetime's condemnation to an often violent hell in which people were deprived of life, liberty, and too often their own children. Now, the amazing thing about this that struck me is that it took you watching a fucking movie to figure this out.
Yeah. Who taught him that slave masters were benevolent?
yeah.
And
I
that
believe
slave-
that was the schooling back in the 1950s. I was reading an article studying it up on this topic today, and he had said that that's what he learned in school.
Well, you go down south in a lot of places. That's what people still parrot today. That
And they call the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression.
Right.
Yeah, and
right.
that they were benevolent to, and that the slave owner who beat his slaves that's just like an image that's been blown out of proportion. That's what you actually hear people say this stuff.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's crazy shit.
Crazy. It is crazy.
Go down south and take a tour of like a plantation in Tennessee.
That's
And
okay.
No, they've got them like they're like historical.
Right.
Like then they take you like through a tour and then like a, and the one thing when I went through this, I forget, it was out in someplace outside of Nashville. They talked about how like when the Northern Army came in, they made the plantation owners live in the slave quarters with the slaves, and they all everyone acted like there was a moment of solace, like this was a sad thing, and I was just like fist pumping, and that was great.
Yeah.
They should have done it sooner. And
All right.
Wow.
Oh, So basically, I want to end this out by
All right.
guilty, not guilty.
Guilty.
Guilty. Not in a Klan sort of way.
No.
But just being totally out of touch.
It's the covert, built-in like racism that's in language, that's institutionalized, that's like thought to be like normal and natural. So he doesn't think he's a racist. He says these things, but it is. So.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'm gonna go with guilty, not of being an overt racist, but just being that out of touch.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you mean what I said was racist? I like black people. What are you talking about?
But tradition, Yeah.
Yeah, and well, conventional people, well, maybe I said the wrong thing, I'm sorry. But you're still guilty. Maybe you need to think about things before you write them.
Yeah, somebody needs to double check that.
Or at least have a better editor. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and share with your friends. If you want to see more, go to our channel at youtube.com/TYTNation. And if you really want to support the show, support this channel, go to our fundraising campaign at www.patreon.com/TYTNation. The website is in the description below. Thank you guys, and keep watching.